The NBA has been around for 75 years, and we've seen a lot of faces of the NBA, starting with the 60s with Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain, the 70s with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the 80s with Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, the 90s with Michael Jordan, the 2000s with Kobe Bryant, and the 2010s with LeBron James. But the biggest question here is who will be the next face of the NBA, and I'm going to be answering that today. And the way I'll be doing this is with a point system. There's going to be 5 categories. We have talent, marketability, the market they're in, play style, and general appeal. All of these categories are important because in order to be the face of the NBA, you need to excel at all of them. And all of the past faces of the NBA have excelled at all of them as well. But here are the 5 guys that I'll be talking about today. We've got Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, Luka Doncic, and Ja Morant. And those are the 5 guys I'll be using today. Now, if you're a new viewer who's never seen my content before, make sure you stick around to the end. And if you enjoyed the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And if you're a returning viewer, make sure you subscribe as well. Over 98% of my viewers who watch my channel are not subscribed yet. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you do that. Now, as always, let's get right into the video. Now, the first guy we're going to evaluate today is Jason Tatum. Now, first we're going to talk about his marketability. Jason Tatum already has Jordan endorsements, he's the face of a Ruffles flavor, and you can see him in a lot of NBA promos. His personality may not be as outspoken as the other guys, but his face is definitely out there. Jason Tatum is a pretty humble guy and doesn't say that many controversial things. I mean, you've never really seen a headline that has had Jason Tatum saying something negative about someone else, or anything negative in general. So for marketability, I would have to give Jason Tatum a 9 out of 10. Now let's talk about the team he's on, and it's the Boston Celtics. And we all know how big of a market the Boston Celtics are. They always have one of the highest revenues in the league, they have one of the richest histories in the league, and they're almost always on national television. And not to mention, year after year, they're always one of the most searched up and popular teams in sports. So Jason Tatum being the best player on one of the most popular teams in sports in general just gives him a huge advantage. So for the team he's on, I would have to give him a 10 out of 10 for the simple fact that the Boston Celtics are one of the most popular teams in sports. And that gives him such a massive advantage over others. Now let's evaluate his playstyle, because I feel like this is one of the more important factors. And playstyle is one of the more important factors because in the general public's eyes, no one wants to see a boring player. I mean, no matter how good you are, it does not matter. If you're not tuned into the NBA on a regular basis, then it wouldn't matter to you. I mean, just look at a player, for example, Tim Duncan. In the 2000s, Tim Duncan was easily one of the top 2 best players in the league. He had the best records and won multiple championships and was easily the best at his position. And because of his playstyle, he really didn't have that much of an advantage. People couldn't see him as the face of the NBA, and his playstyle was part of the reason. So that's why playstyle is one of the more important factors on this list. But going back to Jason Tatum, I feel like his playstyle definitely appeals to the general audience. Jason Tatum is an all-around player and has a silky smooth jump shot and a really nice handle. The general public loves skilled players who use their skill to their advantage and make the game look silky smooth. But the only thing with Jason Tatum is that he doesn't have the freaky athleticism. Jason Tatum really doesn't have that one attribute that sets him apart from others. I mean, guys in the past like LeBron, who had the freakish athleticism, Michael Jordan with the highlights and the dunks, Magic with the passing, and Bird with the shooting. I mean, Jason Tatum, when you look at his skill set, he really doesn't have that one attribute that sets him apart, and I think that that is what's going to hold him back. Now, not saying that that's a bad thing, because obviously Jason Tatum with that play style is easily one of the best players in the league, but to the general public, that will hold him back. So as far as his playstyle, I would have to give him an 8. And now moving on to Jason Tatum's talent. Now Jason Tatum easily is one of the top 10 best players in the league. And you can make the argument that the way he's been playing this season, he's been a top 5 player. But in order to be the face of the league, you need to either be the best player in the league or be borderline top 2. And I don't think Jason Tatum is either. If you look at the NBA's history, there's never been a player who's been the face of the league and has been outside of the top 2. And for that reason, I would have to give Jason Tatum a 7 in this category. And then moving on to general perception. And Jason Tatum in the public's eyes has been perceived pretty well. He's never been a controversial guy, and a lot of people know who he is and what he does. And for that reason, I would have to give Jason Tatum an 8 in this category. And that will leave Jason Tatum with a score of 42. And now moving on to Giannis Antetokounmpo. And starting off with marketability, I think Giannis can be marketed very well. He's already been in a bunch of commercials, he has his own shoe, and the Greek Freak really isn't a bad nickname to have either. There's so many unique things about Giannis's personality, so I would have to give Giannis a 10 in this category. And now moving on to Giannis's team, which is the Bucks. And this is obviously going to be Giannis's downfall, because the Bucks aren't a big market team and have never been. They've never been one of the most popular teams, and they still aren't. And obviously they will become a bigger market as long as Giannis stays there, but as far as right now, they still aren't. So I would have to give Giannis a 6 in this category. And now moving on to playstyle. And Giannis definitely shines in this category. He's 6'11", all muscle, and plays bully ball all game, and not to mention he has a highlight almost every week. And he has an attribute that sets him apart from everyone else, which is his freakish athleticism and the fact that he can do things at his size that we've never seen before. So I would have to give Giannis a 10 in this category. And now moving on to talent. And Giannis, as of right now, is the top 2 player in the league. At worst, depending on who you ask, is a top 3 player in the league. But generally, most people will say that Giannis is the best player in the league. So for this category, I would have to give Giannis a 10 as well. And now moving on to general perception. And flat out, people love Giannis. If you go out onto the street and ask a regular person who Giannis is, then I'm pretty sure they'll know. Giannis is easily one of the most popular players in the league, and it's not really hard to see why. So for general perception, I would have to give Giannis a 9. And that will give Giannis a final score of 45. And now moving on to the next player I've got on this list, and we've got Joel Embiid. And of course, we're going to start with marketability. Now, as far as Joel Embiid, we've seen him in a lot of commercials. He has his own shoe, and he's a pretty funny guy and is a pretty outspoken person. So as far as marketability, I would have to give Joel Embiid a 10. And now moving on to the team that he's on. And the team that he's on definitely gives him an advantage, because the 76ers are one of the biggest markets in the league, and they're one of the most popular teams in sports. And for a long time, they've been a big market and they've been popular. The Sixers have a ton of nationally televised games this season, and anytime the Sixers do anything, it makes headlines. So for this category, I would have to give Joel Embiid a 10. And now moving on to playstyle. And as far as Joel Embiid's playstyle to the general public, I think it's good but nothing special, because like I said, you need to have an attribute that really stands out, and to the masses that's extremely important. But the fact that Joel Embiid is so graceful and so skilled at his size, I think that puts him over the top. And the fact that he can shoot outside shots and he's dominant, that definitely gives him an edge. So for this category, I will have to give Joel Embiid a 9. And now moving on to talent. And as far as talent, Joel Embiid is a borderline top 10 player in today's league, but he's not the best player in the league or top 2. So for this category, I would have to give Joel Embiid an 8. And now moving on to general perception. And Embiid, as far as popularity, really isn't one of the more popular players in the league as far as general perception. And not saying that Joel Embiid isn't popular, but as far as the general public, this isn't really where Joel Embiid shines. So as far as general perception, I would have to give Joel Embiid a 7. And that would give Joel Embiid a final score of 44. And now the next player that we have on this list is Luka Doncic, and we're going to talk about marketability. Now, as far as marketability, this is definitely Luka's weakest point, because we haven't really seen Luka Doncic in that many commercials, and as far as personality, he really doesn't say as much. So for marketability, I would have to give Luka Doncic a 7. And now moving on to the team that he's on. And as far as the Dallas Mavericks, they're definitely one of the biggest markets and one of the more popular teams in the league. The Mavs usually do have a lot of nationally televised games, so for the team that he's on, I would have to give him a 9. Now, as far as playstyle, I think it's the same as Embiid, because Embiid has a lot of great attributes that you don't see in a lot of guys his size, but doesn't really have that one attribute that really sets him apart from other NBA players. And I can see that same thing in Luka. Whereas Luka is a 6'7" point guard and is easily one of the best playmakers in the league and can score anywhere while making it look easy. So for playstyle, I'd have to give Luka a 9 as well. And now moving on to talent. And Luka Doncic, like the others, is easily a top 10 player in the league right now. And you could easily argue that he's top 5. But as of late, Luka Doncic has definitely been in the conversation for best player in the league, and also being the second best player in the league. And even though he does have a case, I just don't have him that high. So for talent, I would definitely give Luka a 9. And now moving on to general perception. And Luka, as far as the general public, really isn't that popular. And a lot of it has to do with his personality and the fact that he's not really an outspoken guy. I think that if you put Luka Doncic in the position to show his personality, like in commercials and other forms of media, I think that in the general public's eyes he would become a lot more popular. But because he isn't put in position to do those things, then I think that that really hurts his case. So as far as general perception, I would have to give him a 7. And that would give Luka an overall score of 41. And now moving on to the last candidate, that is Ja Morant. And starting out with marketability, Ja Morant is easily one of the more marketable players in the league. Ja has already been in multiple commercials. He's been a guy who's been in multiple NBA promos, and he always has the craziest highlights. I mean, the only thing that he's really missing is his own shoe, and obviously that's coming on the way. So as far as marketability, I would have to give Ja Morant a 10. And now moving on to his team, and the Grizzlies really aren't that big of a market. The Grizzlies are a fairly new team, which is part of the reason why they're not that popular and aren't that big of a market. I think that Ja Morant will definitely help them as far as being a bigger market, but as far as now, they aren't. So for this category, I would have to give Ja Morant a 6. And now moving on to playstyle, and Ja Morant definitely shines here because Ja has one of the more exciting playstyles in the league. I mean, he has a highlight almost every week. He's got one attribute that sets him apart from everyone else. He has a flashy playstyle on court, and he does it consistently. And you can make the argument that Ja Morant is one of the 3 most entertaining players in the league. So as far as playstyle, I have to give Ja Morant a 10. And now moving on to talent. And like I said earlier, you have to be either the second best player with a real argument for being the best player, or just flat out be the best player. And Ja Morant is neither. I mean, if you go out and ask anyone, it doesn't matter who it is. Most of the time people will say Ja Morant is a top 10 player, but you'll never hear them say he's a top 2 player. And he definitely isn't a top 2 player to me, at least. So as far as talent, I would have to give Ja Morant a 7. And now moving on to general perception. And Ja Morant, as far as the general public, definitely shines. He's one of the flashiest players in the league. He's one of the more charismatic players in the league and has really gained massive popularity since he's been in the league. I mean, Ja Morant's influence with his style and the way that he talks definitely gives him an advantage. So as far as general perception, I would have to give Ja Morant a 10. And that would give Ja Morant a final score of 43. And now let's look at everyone's scores as a whole. At first, we've got Giannis with a score of 45. Second, we've got Joel Embiid with a score of 44. In third place, we've got Ja Morant with a score of 43. In fourth, we've got Jason Tatum with a score of 42. And in last place, we've got Luka Doncic with a score of 41. And now with that being said, Giannis will be the next face of the NBA. Now, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, and if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe. All of my social media links will be down below in the description. More videos just like this one weekly, and as always, I'm out. Peace.